A new era in Chapel Hill has begun under new head coach Bill Belichick, coming over from the New England Patriots via retirement. And with that being said, I've got a few special guests coming on the show today from the Tar Pit podcast, covering all things North Carolina to break down this year's season preview for the North Carolina Tar Heels. It's time to break the huddle. Line. The offensive line is so huge in any program, any NFL franchise. You see a lot of first-round offensive linemen. And what does Bill Belichick do? The first transfer he gets to come join the team is a center, followed by a few other dudes. And one of the big guys that, no pun intended, but maybe pun intended, guy that we'll talk about, and Daniel King. I believe he's 6'5", 370, just a big old boy. I'll turn it over to you, Trevor, because you alluded to it. The offensive line is going to be key for the development of Gio Lopez along with the run game. What can Carolina expect coming into this year with that offensive line up front?
Man, I'm very high on this offensive line room. Hopefully I don't go down, eating my words, right?
Oh, you're good.
Bill and Mike preached when they got here from day one, man. And you spoke about the first addition was Christo Kelly, the center out of Holy Cross. But they wanted to build the football team just like they did in the NFL. And when they did that, they built it from the inside out. So the guys they went after first was the offensive line, the defensive line. And the dudes that we added, you talked about Daniel King. He's a two-time all Sun Belt performer, allowed just 9 career sacks, over 1,300 career snaps. Pass blocking, he's only allowed 9 sacks. We went out and we got Will Osteen, another big-time addition, a guy that was very experienced, has had a ton of reps and has not allowed many sacks at all either. And Chad Lindbergh, he's a guy that started out in Georgia, played with Austin Blasky, another Georgia guy that we have on our team. Austin was here last year, but Chad comes over, and there's a lot of new bodies in this room, but there's a lot of guys with a ton of experience, and they've been good everywhere they've been. So I am very high on this room, man. I think Mac used to preach, and Bill, we haven't heard enough about it, right? He hasn't talked as much as Mac used to. Mac would have a press conference about every month, it seemed like. But Mac would preach, you always wanted to get up to at least 8 offensive linemen to feel confident. 8 offensive linemen you could count on. I really think with this room, man, we got at least 8, maybe 10 guys that we could really count on to be contributors to this offensive line. And I think Daniel King is probably the guy that is the highest addition, I guess, in terms of what he did at Troy. But I think there's a lot of pieces around him that are very good too.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off you, Trev. Chris had a great saying on our offensive line breakdown. It's a room that's full of bodies, but not just any bodies. I thought it was pretty cool too. So that's been my saying as well with this room, man. It's a room that you got guys that returning, like Austin Blasky, Travion Green, Aidan Banfield, who was a freshman last season, but was forced to play, a pretty prominent role along the offensive line. But then you got guys like, Miles McVay, who we spoke with, and he raves about, the mindset of this offensive line. Daniel King, Will Osteen, Christo Kelly, all of these guys that we've brought in are guys that have played, a high level amount of football just at different levels across the college football landscape, some smaller conferences than others. But the one thing that we can say is that, you look at the stat lines and they've played meaningful snaps. And that's what you want. Trevor said it best, used to it as Carolina fans, we would have to worry about, at least having 7 bodies, along the offensive line. And that's just way too thin to have any kind of, solid, meaningful production across the length of a season. This room right here is, like Trevor said, we've got, 10, 11 guys that I really think could come in and not really see a huge drop off in production and protecting Gio and opening up the run game. We got a little tease at the Practice Like a Pro event, and I would have loved to have seen Omarion Hampton behind the way that offensive line then run blocked. And that was guys without guys like Daniel King and Miles and, some of those guys that we've brought in the later portal window. But a room that we're really high on. It's cool to be in a position and have a luxury of having a deep offensive line room and, defensive line as well. We'll talk about that later. But Bill and Mike, like Trevor said, they sat down and addressed areas of needs, and one big area of need was offensive line and depth, and they addressed that, and I think they did a pretty good job at it. So we'll see how it pans out, but definitely love the spot we're in, at least on paper.
Yeah, and I think, again, I go back to the Bill Belichick method. It's all about smart, physical, tough football. And again, these guys aren't going to be your 4-star guys necessarily, but they're going to be disciplined. They're going to be physical. They're going to be smart. I really like what Bill Belichick is doing on the offensive line as well. And I guess one question I have for y'all, and I hear this a lot in the media, is the key concern, the lack of cohesion and experience as a unit. And I think that kind of goes for any program in the NIL era, aka free agency. Is there going to be some growing pains in that area, or do you think Bill Belichick can rally these guys and get them to play tough physical ball together as a unit?
Can I take the lead on this one, Trev, real quick, and then pass it to you?
Go ahead.
Matt, you talk about, and the topic of conversation has been about experience. We rattle off some stats on some guys that, we've brought in, like take Daniel King, for example, a guy that comes in from Troy. And, I don't know how many people watch Troy football, but that's been a program that's been, on the rise. And he's been a big part of that. A team that's competed in numerous bowl games over the last 2 or 3 seasons, has competed for a Sun Belt championship, I believe, as well. So he's seen high level football from a program that like Carolina is on the rise and just at a different level, being on the Sun Belt, but. The lack of cohesion, I would say you kind of address that with guys that you have coming back from last year, like the Austin Blaskys, who's an older guy, and Aidan Banfield, who's a freshman that was forced to play a lot of snaps last season. He knows, kind of how to hold that down as well. And then Travion Green, a guy that I think's got to take a big step this season. But you rely on those 3 core guys to really kind of bring the cohesion within the room itself. And of course, you throw in a guy like Bill Belichick, and then Will Friend, our offensive line coach, who's coached some pretty productive offensive lines. And you rely on those 3 core guys, your returning guys that have had experience and at all different levels and even at different periods of their career. With Aidan being so young, to really hold it down. And I don't know if any talk about cohesion. I don't know if anybody's watched a Christo Kelly. Good morning or inspiration talk, but go check his Instagram out. If that won't bring cohesion to an offensive line room, I don't know what will. So I think we're well taken care of in both of the experience and the cohesion part, at least in my opinion. Trevor, what you think?
I mean, I think we've been lucky enough to bring on a lot of guys to talk about. Especially Miles, man, and to be a guy that has just, met these dudes a few months ago, it seems like they're best friends already. So the wonderful thing I think about the college game is you mentioned it, is like free agency now, right? So there's a lot of turnover with a lot of programs. Granted, we had a lot more than what most programs do, but you look at the good thing about college ball and especially in our situation right now, nobody really knows. Like, we could go out here and suck. Nobody knows. Bill Belichick's never coached a snap of college football. But you look at like last year, Florida State, they were supposed to be so good. and fell off the face of, so nobody
Yeah,
really
very
knows.
true.
And then what Indiana brought in a ton of guys, it won't 70, but probably 40 plus guys. And look what they did. Right. So that's the thing that I love about the college game, more so than the NFL, because there is a lot of unknowns. But I know one thing: when I'm going to battle, I would love to have the greatest coach of all time on my side. So that's got me a little confident, but it's going to be curious to see, right? Bill's got a lot of pressure on him, but I don't think the players don't,
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in real quick, when you think about the offensive line, the first thing that I think about, and yes, they have the experience. Now a lot of these guys are moving up into the Power Four. Biggest thing that I look at is the road test and how are the crowds going to be. And when you look at the schedule, and I don't want to get too far ahead because we're going to talk about that in a second, but to me, their hardest road test is at Syracuse. I mean, in terms of crowd noise and everything like that, they avoid FSU, they avoid Miami, and Louisville and SMU. So, not to jump too far ahead, but when you look at their road schedule, there's not really many stadiums where I look at that and go, that could give them some trouble, especially on the cadence and on the offensive line side. So I think that plays a significant role as well. You get Clemson at home. You don't have to go to Death Valley and play Clemson. So it should be looking very, very good for the offensive line for the Tar Heels. And